I'm currently in Portugal, and COVID restrictions are beginning to come to an end. And today, this is just the Airbnb I'm in here, which is pretty nice, and there's still some bargains available. Obviously because travel's so restricted. But what I'm going to talk about today is being cancelled and how fire is related to being cancelled. Now, there's something called the Overton window. Don't know if you're familiar with that. That is what conversation is kind of the accepted discourse in society. Now, it's not relevant whether you have left-wing or right-wing views. This isn't really my point. My point is, if you have views which stray outside wherever the Overton window is, and incidentally, it changes all the time. Like, it didn't used to be controversial to assign a gender to a human based on their birth gender. And now that is controversial. And again, I'm making no comment on that. But what is acceptable discourse, it changes all the time. And if you stray outside what is acceptable discourse, you can lose your job. You can forever have your name on the internet with what you've said attached to it. Now, there's a great book by John Ronson called So You've Been Publicly Shamed, where he talks about people, and this was a few years ago, and I think the situation has gotten much worse since then, where he talks about people who were publicly shamed for things which weren't really that bad, but somehow people love a pile-on, and when once a few people have piled on because it seems like they did something really bad when it wasn't actually that bad, or it's just one momentary lapse of judgment, then it's very easy for them to be cancelled. So today I'm talking about cancellation and being cancellation resistant. And again, it doesn't matter what your politics are, that's not really the point. The point is, how can you stay true to your morals, whatever they are, without risking your livelihood, it's quite an extreme example, without ending up on the streets, or without having to constantly say things at work that you disagree with, for example. Well, fire is a great way of doing this. Why is fire a great way of doing this? Well, fire can teach you a number of things. And if you're not familiar, fire is financial independence, retire early. This is the basic premise of this. I'll go through it quickly now. Is that if it costs you $40,000 a year to live, and you can live for a lot less than that in many places, all you need to do is save up $1 million, and you can get 4% interest on that per year. And incidentally, you should be able to earn a lot more than that, but this is a worst case scenario. Now, you can either do this by massively reducing your expenses, increasing your income, or both. But if you can get to the point where you are financially independent, then you're cancel-proof. People can try cancelling you, but there's nothing they can do. They can't threaten your job. Oh, I'm going to threaten your job. I don't need a job to survive. I have enough money. I'm financially independent. Oh, we're going to try and shut down your business. Well, you can, but I'll still be fine if you do. And actually, you probably can't, because it's my own business. If you own your own business, there's not much people can do to shut it down. They could go after your customers, perhaps, but that your customers may not care. Or even if they do all of that, because you're financially independent, you can still feed your family, you can still feed yourself. So one of the crucial things about financial independence that I don't think people talk about very often is the anti-cancel factor. It's your ability to resist the coercion of society into making you do things you don't want to do, making you say things you don't believe in and don't want to say. It enables you to stand up for what you think is right. If, for example, we had an extreme government, such as happened in the 1930s, and you wanted to stand up for what was right, and they weren't yet inflicting violence, but to coerce you, people may come after your job, try and get you fired, etc. This gives you an extra layer of resistance. Also, if you're location independent, if you're a digital nomad, this too makes it harder to cancel you. Because if people find out where you live, or they know you're based somewhere and they want to make your life difficult, you can just, worst case, leave the country, or maybe you don't live in your home country anymore anyway. So the combination of being a digital nomad and being in the FIRE movement and having some kind of financial bedrock, some savings, some investments, some cryptocurrency, whatever it is, having that to fall back on and having the income that gives you enables so many great things in life. If we compare this to the average worker in the UK or US or in the West or pretty much in any country, something like, I think 60% of Americans don't have any kind of emergency fund. I think this is, again, the same in most countries. So they live paycheck to paycheck. So if they lose their job, they have to get another job soon. So that means that they're more willing to do things they don't want to do to get a job. They're willing to say things they don't believe are true. They're willing to accept the policies, whatever these companies are, whatever training they have to go through at these companies. They're willing to accept it because they need the money. If they're mistreated by this company, they may have to accept that because they need the money. Now imagine a world where you've got 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years worth of savings and capital and investments that you could live off. In the worst case scenario, you're not going to be forced to get whatever job it is that you desperately need to pay the bills. And a big part of this equation, as well as savings, is lowering your costs. In terms of what I've done to lower my costs, I used to live in Vietnam. I lived in a shared house until an older age than a lot of people would find that acceptable. It's not a big deal. I paid $300 a month in rent in a reasonably nice apartment in a tropical country. Other living expenses extremely low. It was great. I had a great time. You don't need to spend a lot of money to have a good living environment. It's endlessly interesting to live overseas. Now I live in Prague. I pay $400 a month in rent in a modern shared flat. Now some people may think, oh, I couldn't live in a shared house again. I'm 30 or I'm 40 or even I'm 50. And you don't have to live in a shared house, but having a bit of stoicism, having the ability to rough it a little bit. Like for example, when I've traveled in India, for example, I stayed in hotels and beach huts that cost me $3 a night. Now, especially the hotels weren't great, but there's something about knowing that you can go and stay in a $3 hotel in India and you'll be fine. And you can do that repeatedly and actually you'll be having a great time. Because it's just fascinating to travel, and India's a fascinating country as an example. And there's similarly cheap places in Southeast Asia and all over the world. Knowing you can do that and you can stay in somewhere that cheap and you'll be fine. This is the core of Stoicism. There's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. That's a good kind of modern primer of Stoicism, which I recommend. So knowing you can live that cheaply is great, but you don't have to live in such basic conditions all the time. And by the way, the beach huts right on the beach in Goa, $3 a night. If you negotiate the price down, paradise, $3 a night. I wouldn't really call that roughing it. But knowing you can live in those conditions is a huge step, if you have to, or if you want to, is a huge step to your independence, your uncancelability. Because you are no longer completely dependent on your 9-to-5 job. You know you can walk away from any job at any time because of your principles, or because they're mistreating you, or because you don't like it, because you hate your job. You know you can do that. You know you can go and live in cheap accommodation in many places in the world. For example, when I lived in Vietnam, visa situations change all the time. So when I lived in Vietnam, you could continue to renew your visa. I don't know if that's still the case. There are usually places without visa restrictions. And if there aren't, you can live somewhere for 3 months and move to another place. There are always options when it comes to living somewhere that's nice, that you can have fun in, that's cheap. But knowing that you have these options, knowing you can live a bit of a simpler, more basic life, which can actually be a lot more fun than your BMW McMansion life, doing a job you hate, commuting every day just to fund the huge house you don't need and the car you hate, knowing you don't need any of that, that you can have principles and stay true to yourself because you have financial independence. So that's such a powerful feeling, and they've done studies on what makes people happy. Having control over your life is a huge factor in what makes people happy. Even if you're in a 9-to-5 job, having control over the work you do it's quite sunny out here. Having control over the work you do is a huge factor in what makes people happy in their job. And the root of all of this, being able to take a better job, being able to be more discerning, not needing to rush into a job, being able to take 6 months to get one, or being able to take some time to build your own business, all of this comes back to financial independence. I think this should be the cornerstone really of everyone's life, because it gives you a much better life. And this comes back in large part to being uncancelable. So if you have a decent amount of savings, you've got, let's say, index funds that are earning interest, you have cryptocurrency, maybe you have property. Just having cash in an account these days doesn't really earn you much, but just having resources to draw on. Or if you just get fired and you can't find a job, having resources to draw on is so important. We don't teach this at school. Why isn't this stuff taught at school? I mean, there's two ways to look at that. One is it's a conspiracy, and the state or the man wants to keep you down. The other one is and I think it's more likely, it's just incompetence. Who's the people that decide the curriculums at school are themselves wage serfs. They themselves don't know about financial independence. Financial independence is like a secret society, and it shouldn't be, because it benefits everyone. And it really just comes down to living within your means. Like the magic that living within your means gives you. I did look a bit underexposed on this with the backlight there. The magic that comes from having 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years worth of money in the bank, knowing you could live in a really cheap place if you needed to and still have fun, knowing you have a passport, knowing you've been to many countries, is great. And travel is another huge part of this. Like, if you haven't traveled much, I recommend, and obviously when the COVID restrictions end, I recommend travel. Travel is another key component. All these things interlock. The digital nomad thing interlocks, the cancel resistance interlocks, financial independence stuff interlocks. It all interlocks, and it all boosts. They all boost each other, because you don't need $40,000 a year to live in a cheaper developing country. You could do that on even $5,000 if you really needed to, or $10,000 a year. So, or you can just go and live in a developing country, work remotely, and your costs could just be much lower for that time, enabling you to save more money. These things are all interlocked, and they're all virtuous. But if you've never traveled, if you haven't, say, even just done a simple backpacking trip, staying in youth hostels in Europe, in Eastern Europe, which is cheaper, or in Southeast Asia, which is also extremely cheap. You can stay in good youth hostels in Southeast Asia for $5 a night, $10 a night. Same in Eastern Europe, very nice, high quality places. If you've never done that, you don't know what's possible. You don't know how fun it is. You don't know that you're meeting people from all around the world every day. Every day you just decide, I'll do some work in the morning in this co-working space, or in my hotel room, or in the hostel common area. And then, what should I do tomorrow? I'll go to this country. I'll go to this beach. I've been doing that kind of thing for getting on for 20 years now. But it's become, and I'm a software developer, so it's been easy for me to do that. But working remotely, of course, is getting much more common now, much more prevalent. So is it possible you could work remotely? You don't have to instantly become a digital nomad overnight. You don't have to instantly get fire overnight. Just save a little bit more money, live within your means, move to a cheaper flat, cheaper apartment, lower your costs, get rid of that expensive car, do all of the fire things, go traveling for a month, backpacking, in an area of the world that interests you. Ideally not somewhere super expensive like Western or Northern Europe, or maybe not the US, though the US has cheaper areas, but somewhere cheap. Because once you've done these things, you'll realize, well, I could easily live here. And once you know that, you're a big step towards being uncancelable. You're a big step towards not having to do a job you hate, not having all these services you have to pay for every month, creating your serfdom, keeping you as a serf, meaning you just don't have control over your time or your money. So, yeah, as I say, you don't have to do all of these things now. You don't have to start saving 50% of your income. You don't have to go and travel the world for a year. Just do some small things. Start living within your means. Get a cheaper car. Go on a backpacking trip. Just put a few of these things in place now. Then it's going to be much easier if you do get cancelled. It's going to be much easier to cope with it if you're a bit more knowledgeable about living cheaply abroad. If you've got a little bit more savings, even if you've only got $1,000 in savings or $5,000, that's a lot better than having $0 in savings. These are all things that this is current you doing things to benefit future you, and future you is really going to appreciate this. Now, the reason I'm talking about cancellation is because I think it's not getting better, it's getting worse, and people are getting cancelled for smaller and smaller things. So to not have some degree of cancellation resistance is kind of irresponsible now. I mean, it could land you in a terrible situation in the future where you're forced to apologize having done nothing wrong, where you're forced to do continued training in some ideologies at work that you don't agree with without being able to speak up for fear of losing your job. These are the kind of things that make you miserable if you have no cancellation resistance. So cancellation resistance is really something everyone has to think about if they don't want to end up in a really bad situation in life. The world economy obviously is entering a really weird time. It's going to be very turbulent. We don't know what's coming. We can't see the future. And having a decent amount of savings and investments and things you can fall back on, that could be even more crucial than we realize now in the future. So, I mean, do you really need that BMW? I mean, is that really making you happy? I mean, if you look at what makes people happy, it's generally free stuff, like spending time with friends and family, things like that. It's not expensive stuff. And if it's stuff like travel, you can travel cheaply and have just as much fun. You don't need to spend. Traveling is not expensive. You can travel the world on $10,000 for a year. If you really want to rough it, if you want to go in style, you could do it on $20,000 or $30,000 easily. Traveling is very cheap, but you have to do it, and you have to stay in hostels, or you have to be a bit more flexible, not go on this package tours. You have to be a bit more flexible to see what's possible, see what's out there. But everyone should start to think about how they can become cancel-proof. And as I say, it doesn't matter what your politics are. It could be left or right, far left, hopefully not far right, but your definition of what is far right could be different to the definition of what other people think is far right. It doesn't matter what your politics is. You need to think about what you would do if you got cancelled and how much money you have. Do you have a 6-month emergency fund? I mean, just having a six-month long emergency fund that enables you to keep going, that could be the first thing you do. Just put $10, $50, $100 in that every week, every month. Just build that up slowly. Get that emergency fund in place. What then? Go traveling. Go traveling cheaply. Downsize your flat. Live somewhere cheaper. Live within your means. None of this stuff has to be unpleasant and boring. This can be fun. I mean, you probably spend a lot of money on stuff that doesn't make you happy. So prioritize what you're spending money on, but think about cancellation now, because there's a good job I'd say at least a 50% chance at some point in your life you're going to be coerced into doing something for your job that you desperately don't want to do. And at that point, you'll either be able to quit your job or just say no, I disagree with this and here's why, or you'll just have to suck it up. And this probably won't just happen once, this will probably happen repeatedly. And each time that happens, you're going to just get a bit more miserable. And you can combat this. You just need to be more cancel proof. And this all stems from money. You need to reduce your costs, you need savings to fall back on. It's really that simple. It's cash. How little can you live on? How much can you save? The more you do, the more powerful you become, the more cancel proof you become. So start thinking about cancel proofing your life. And please like, subscribe and comment below. And let me know what you guys have done to become cancel proof. Let me know if any of you have been cancelled. That would be really fascinating. Anyone who's been cancelled, I'd love to have a chat with you on the show, just see how you coped with it. So yeah, I'll see you guys on the road.